You're not listening! This isn't about me! This is about the thousands of people murdered and the countless other lives destroyed! Why is above the law? Why does never pay for his crimes? Where is it when people are trying to put their world back together? What do I want? I want the truth. I want justice. I want...
Superhero fatigue. It's not a real thing. Frankly, it never was, and if history has taught us anything, frankly, it never will be. When was the last time you heard someone say how sick and tired they are of superhero movies? How often have you noticed that complaint coinciding with the release of a new Marvel film? A film that, let's be honest with ourselves here, was never going to land with anyone in particular for one reason or another, something that I covered in my Brave New World review. But this mindset, it's a tired, nihilistic, and frustrating old rhetoric that feels like it belongs in the annals of history as some misguided attempt to be socially relevant because you stand out from the crowd, right? You stand out from the non-thinkers. Because you just know that if they picked up their inane opinions from the ground where they deserve to lay, engaged in some truly honest discourse about the state of media and storytelling, they would realize their own inaccuracies with statements like superhero fatigue. Now, I'm not saying they need to watch Brave New World and all of its sappy attempts at generating emotion without any payoff. I'm not saying that they need to watch The Boys with all of its wandering desire to be simultaneously taken very seriously, but without giving up the indulgence of its own irony. I'm not even saying you need to rest on your haunches and wait for James Gunn to swoop in with a streak of blue and red. But what I am saying, directly stating in fact, is that you need to watch it. Invincible is hands down, unironically, especially after the finale of season 3, one of the best told superhero stories in movie and TV medium that we have ever had the privilege of being alive to experience. And from a personal point of view, so this is just coming from me, it is right up there with the all-time goats of comic book media like The Dark Knight, The Boys, Daredevil, and Legion. It's a deeply personal story about loss, growth, anger, maturity, and spectacle seen through the eyes of characters put through a veritable meat grinder of trials and tribulations. It's a heartfelt story about family, the importance of friendships, allowing yourself to be loved and cared for while marrying together some of the harshest examples of extreme violence that you have ever seen. But all that has to start from a strong opening. You don't get to the status of having the second highest rated episode of TV right behind the masterpiece that is Breaking Bad's Ozymandias episode without starting from a place of intense strength. And Invincible has, quite possibly, the strongest opening to a comic book story since the bank heist opening in The Dark Knight. It could not have been a more basic opening to a superhero story ever. A pair of villains attack the White House in Washington, D.C. in an attempt to, overthrow it, I guess, only to get halted by the the Guardians of the Globe. Comprised of JL member wannabes, you have your Superman, Wonder Woman, Martian Manhunter, Flash, Aquaman, and I guess Hot Girl. And would you look at that, we even have our very own Batman. And wouldn't you know it, they save the day, rescue the civilians, and all is well. That is, after another hero sporting a look cleaner than one of Jesus' apostles rolls up and does most of the work for them. This hero is Omni-Man, a hero of immense strength and intelligence, but seemingly content to be a lone operator. He doesn't fall within the constraints of the Guardians, and from frame 1, you already love him. From there, it continues to feel like a somewhat standard superhero outing. We meet Mark Grayson, the son of Nolan and Debbie Grayson, and Nolan, aka Omni-Man. Mark doesn't have his father's powers, a point that seems to be the source of some contention between them.
I had a pretty interesting day.
Are you sure? Sorry I'm late. Honest to God, a dragon was attacking Hong Kong. I stopped it.
Ooh, a dragon. Nice. Mark was getting ready to tell us how interesting his day was.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
But wouldn't you know it, Mark gets his powers that very same episode. And despite his own joy at the realization, Nolan seems off. But we as the audience, we think to ourselves, oh, he's just surprised and doesn't know what to do with this information. We chalk it up as a mental note that Nolan will have to experience some growth of his own to accept his son in a new way and train him. The remainder of this episode is a little more than filler, meeting side characters that will become increasingly important and dedicated side scenes to the Guardians themselves. I remember seeing this episode for the first time and thinking, oh, good, we're gonna be invested in this story. I hope and I look forward to getting to learn more about the Guardians. I mean, it's really cool seeing, like, you know, this alternate take on the Flash vocalize how, like, moving at normal speeds is agony to him.
Joseph, you promised!
Huh? Oh, crap.
How is this going to work if I can't hold your interest through one conversation?
Hold my interest? Olga, please. You can't see things how I do. My perception is just as fast as I am. The briefest conversation...
Oh, wait, there's an alert. Okay, I guess we'll get one more action scene before the credits. I wonder if Omni-Man will be there too. Man, I love that guy. Oh. And just like that, in what amounts to maybe 3 to 5% of the episode's runtime, Invincible completely flips the tables on what you expect to happen. All your theories out the window. All of your perspective on Nolan is completely undone, and any hope you had of learning more about the Guardians dies with Immortal's last breath. What did you just watch? Easy answer. The best opening to a comic book story on TV. The rest of Season 1 is a series of moments and beats where you can't escape that horrible nagging feeling of what could possibly happen next. You internally wince with fear and anxiety every time that Omni-Man interacts with someone. It doesn't matter how charming he is, how handsome he looks, how quickly he rushes to help, you've seen his true face. The ugly, sinister horror beneath the salt and pepper hairline. You've witnessed the brutality of his strength when met on someone he is set against. You don't know why, but that unknown just makes you wonder what else he's capable of. Helped in no small part by an incredible performance by J.K. Simmons, who has continued to deliver incredible moments and beats for Omni-Man throughout the series.
Titan never wanted to be a criminal in the first place. He has a family. I think his daughter's sick.
Even if that was true, you're a Viltrumite, okay? You fought off an alien invasion, saved the country from an asteroid. This is beneath you.
But from episode 1, you just see this very villainous side of J.K. Simmons that frankly you kind of really haven't seen anything quite like this since Whiplash.
You don't seem to understand. Earth isn't yours to conquer.
But also, you soon learn just how much Mark is capable of, because you almost forgot about him. You've become so invested in the mystery of Nolan's actions and intent that you almost forgot that this show isn't about him. Mark moves on from being unable to control his flight and second-guessing his strength to trying to stop an alien invasion. And this is where, aside from Nolan pressing a head together like a rotten piece of fruit, that we realize just how different this show is from anything else. See, in movies like Man of Steel or Avengers, which I've been pretty vocal about enjoying, the heroes in those stories never really stop to be truly aware of the devastation of their actions and the lives being lost around them. They're solely focused on the end goal, the light at the end of the tunnel, paying no mind to the darkness around them. It's part of the reason why I was never able to fully get invested into movies like Civil War or Dawn of Justice, where there's such this big emphasis placed on the destruction and the consequences of the actions of these heroes, but it's such a small part of the story that we really don't get to see the true trauma and turmoil that this causes the characters. But Mark is a human first, hero second. He sees a discarded limb, a lifeless body with dull eyes staring at a sight unseen, and he has a full-on breakdown. He cries, he hyperventilates, and the reality of what this life is threatens to crush him into the ground. It doesn't happen though, because he's saved and assisted by Teen Team, a ragtag group of heroes that loosely resemble DC's Teen Titans. We meet Rexplode, a hilarious but annoying loudmouth with a penchant for cheating on his girlfriend, and that same girlfriend who will become one of the most important characters in the series, Adam Eve, aka Samantha, but I'm just gonna call her Eve. She can bend organic materials into shape and form, kind of like Green Lantern in a way. Mark grows to realize that he has to depend on people around him. He can't do this all by himself. He may be incredibly strong, incredibly fast, and kind-hearted, but he isn't. What do you do when, after coming to rely on the strength of others to mend your weaknesses, that you can no longer rely on the one person who should be able to hold you up? What if your parent is the villain? The one who wants the worst possible outcome for you, but they don't see it that way. This is the soul-shattering realization at the end of season 1.
You lied to me.
You couldn't know the truth. Not until you had your powers. Not until I was sure.
Sure of what?
Sure you were a Viltrumite.
So if I wasn't, I'd just be one more human to conquer?
Nolan reveals his mission, his objective given to him by the government of his planet, the immensely powerful race known as the Viltrumites. He's not here to save the Earth. He's here to conquer it, and he wants Mark by his side. It isn't just Earth either. Nolan fills us in that this is common across the cosmos. Viltrumites only see perfection in their own reflections. They view the violence and devastation that they inflict as mercy on lesser life forms. The thousands of years that they will live bestows on them this incredibly pretentious sense of responsibilities, one that they've bastardized into a goal of uniting the galaxy in their own image. And Mark, he doesn't see it that way.
This is insane! What do you think is gonna happen? That I'm gonna go enslave my friends for a bunch of aliens I've never met? This is my life! These are my people!
We have a responsibility to Viltrum.
I don't give a shit about Viltrum. And I don't care if I live a fucking million years. This is my home, and I won't let you destroy it.
You don't know what you're saying.
Now, you might think deep down, especially when you're first watching this episode, that Nolan ultimately won't do anything to Mark. I mean, after all, he's been there for him. Time and time again. He cares about him, right?
How could you do this?
That was your fault. Your stubbornness against the inevitable killed those people. How many more need to die, Mark?
Nolan proceeds to beat the holy hell out of Mark. That light at the end that blinds the Avengers to the pain that they cause, what if it was a literal train that you're forced to endure as people are smashed into viscera around your flailing body? The physical pain is almost middling compared to the mental torture of this moment, but physical pain there will be.
You want to die for this planet? Fine! What's 17 more years? I can always start again. Make another kid.
As Nolan relentlessly beats Mark into a bloody mess, shattering rocks and limb, as Mark refuses to give in to his father's demented vision of a world united, but some tiny part of Nolan gives pause. He yells at Mark, blaming him for this whole thing, throwing his own internalized screaming at his dying son, begging, if not by word and only unconscious intention, for a justification of his own actions.
Why did you make me do this? You're fighting so you can watch everyone around you die. Think, Mark. You'll outlast every fragile, insignificant being on this planet. You'll live to see this world crumble to dust and blow away. Everyone and everything you know will be gone.
Mark, barely able to muster the energy to speak, can only reply words coming from his own shattered reality, begging, although through entirely conscious desire, for his dad to come back to him.
What will you have after 500 years?
You, Dad. I still have you.
To give up this crusade and just be his dad, be the hero. And at this point, we hoped he would. We've seen what he's capable of, but there's that part we've seen the glimpse of his humanity. You want Omni-Man to face the music and become better. Instead, Nolan barely holds back his tears, lets out one more expletive, and rockets away to space as quickly as he possibly can. And that is how Invincible begins. Season 2 of Invincible reaffirms this concept of growth. While it lacks, in some ways, the bombastic, relentless pace of Season 1's subplots, it more than makes up for it in ways that we see the characters grow. Mark, struggling with the guilt of his father's actions and unable to forgive him or himself for the deaths, tries to do right by his namesake and just make the world a safer place, a better place. But what good is saving a world that just doesn't care about what you do? Eve, struggling with her own place in the world as she tries to do her own small part to fix the violence inflicted on Chicago by Mark and Nolan, finds herself unable to face her own anxieties, her desire to do right by anyone who, blinds her to a naivete of how people act and talk. She wants so desperately to just have a feeling of normalcy in a world that punishes it. A punishment that, as she learns in Season 2, is mostly met upon her by normal people, not supervillains.
Whew, there. Saved you some work.
Rex, who is also struggling with this growing realization of just how much of a dick he is, finds a new lease on life when the teen team is given the choice to become the new Guardians. A choice that they all accept, save for Eve, and a choice that gives Rex a temporary excuse to fail in finding growth. He can continue to be the only him he knows how to be when not directly faced with the consequences of his own actions in Season 1. However, this is the other area in which Invincible excels. See, some shows and movies, they try to marry in this idea of how regular, non-powered people can coexist with people that can create portals and shatter space-time and leap tall buildings in a single bound. Captain America movies try to do this, as did Dawn of Justice, but it rings very hollow with the way that it's written and the way that it's executed. The Boys got a little bit closer, but it still ends up making the mistake of eventually giving everyone who has good reason to hate superpowered individuals their own superpowers or insane plot armor. Invincible does neither of those things. Plot armor is pretty soft, weak in many areas, as we'll soon learn, but it also treats non-powered regular people as people. Characters like Debbie, Amber, William, or Paul have to contend with a reality in which they are overpowered by a degree of several million. While we may stand at our window and come to a frustrating realization that we forgot to mow the lawn, above us is someone with the power of God making sure the world is a safer place. And this one-sided glimpse of power is made evident through human characters that suffer at the hands of superheroes' decisions. Eve effectively causes the death of an innocent woman because she tries to rush cleaning up Chicago and making good on her people's image. Debbie can't live a normal life. She can't date another person or sleep half the time knowing what her husband inflicted on the world. William and Amber are beset by horrific outcomes due to their proximity to Mark. And Mark, worst of all, part of him can't even contend with the idea of continuing to be alive after what happened. He can't conceive of a time or reality where he forgives himself, much less is forgiven by the inhabitants of Earth.
Sounds nice.
So? So this is where you tell me how you are.
I don't know. Okay, I guess.
When was the last time you went out as Invincible?
Yesterday morning, but I'm just flying around like an idiot. I can't stop thinking. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be my dad. What if that happens? What if I become him and I don't even know it?
He's a good person though, so he tries and tries and tries. And by the end, we really get to see him succeed in many, many ways. What's fascinating is seeing how much more confidently Mark interacts with adversity. He tries to understand his mom more, he tries to make a relationship with Amber work, and he tries so damn hard to make up for the mistakes of his father. And while his relationship falls apart and he seems unable to get ahead of his own desires, he's then confronted by yet another Viltrumite, Anissa.
I think you should go now.
Careful, Mark. She's a lot stronger than you.
Remember that we started with reason.
She's stronger, faster, and more ruthless than Omni-Man, but she isn't there with the intent to kill Mark. She doesn't think that's worth the effort, and, but she does teach him a lesson.
Killing you is not my task. But soon, another will come. And if he finds you still resistant to your destiny, He will demonstrate the error of your ways, and this whole planet will pay the price.
Beating him down into the earth with enough violence to make any hero balk in revision. She may not leave him as close to death as Nolan did, but she leaves him with a warning. Conquer Earth by the next time a Viltrumite arrives, and he won't be nearly as considerate or soft as she was. As he struggles to come to terms with such an ominous foreshadowing, Rex reaches his first real character growth. As he tries to be more of a leader and more of a voice of reason, he's given a mission to stop a group of supervillains from launching a series of missiles from a military base. And because this season was so relatively tame in comparison to most of Season 1, we sort of assume it'll lead somewhere different for Rex and Mark. But it doesn't. See, before I get into Rex's moment, because I believe it's the more powerful of the two, the whole time over the course of Season 2, there's been this ominous sub-villain brewing behind the scenes and giving all new tests and trials to our titular characters. His name is Angstrom Levy. Angstrom can open portals into alternate realities. He can open portals into places that you could only dream of. And after a horrible accident involving the Mahler twins fighting Invincible, he finds himself horribly disfigured, but incredibly vengeful. And over the course of the season, we see these little pieces he's picked up, these little chess pieces moving into place. And then we get to the end where Angstrom comes into Mark's home. He threatens Oliver, a character we'll talk about in a little bit. He smashes the arm of Debbie, leaves her to pass out and bleed out. And it's a fight back and forth as Mark gets sent to dimension after dimension, but eventually he catches Angstrom. And Angstrom, he's gotten a lot stronger, but Mark, triply so. And he beats Angstrom into a bloody, pulpy stain in the middle of a desert in an unknown dimension.
I'll never let anyone ever hurt my family!
And then he's greeted by characters that he knows, characters from the future, and they change his entire life.
There's something else I want to talk to you about.
Okay. I love you, Mark. I have for a very long time, and when you disappeared, I was devastated. I should have told you.
Eve.
No, don't tell me. Tell her. Tell her you love her.
So, what about Rex? As they go to the military base, these newly formed Guardians are very quickly realizing that they are woefully outmatched and unprepared for what they encounter. They underestimate these sort of B-tier villains. Duplicate is murdered viciously. Ray is eaten alive in what might be one of the most disturbing visuals this show has created thus far. And Rex gets his body broken, his hand bitten off and swallowed, and a single bullet through the top right of his head. Spraying blood, losing consciousness, and clinging on to life by a thread, he stumbles to his feet and manages to beat the holy hell out of the last standing bad guy. In a way, it's almost a poetic dichotomy to the finale of Season 1. Rex, struggling to grow, is confronted with horrific loss and violence that should have, by all means, killed him in the process. But he fights to his feet, he refuses to let the darkness win, and he claws his way back to a second chance of making things right. He may have been closer to death than Mark, but maybe that was what he needed all along. What about Nolan? I mean, surely we don't get to the end of this story without an update on the mission he was given, and you're completely right. Drifting through space, only his own thoughts and guilt to keep him company. And you heard me correctly. Guilt. Nolan discovers just how much of an impact Mark and Debbie had on him, his slow realization of his own inadequacies and faults becoming massive cracks in his psyche and strength. He finds newfound purpose in the troubles of an alien race called the Thraxans, and much to Mark's dismay, has another child with one of the aliens.
Oh, okay. All right, you're all done with Mom and all done with Earth. Good to know. Super glad you got to show me how great your life is without us.
That's not what I wanted to show you. Mark?
Who is that?
This is your little brother.
You gotta be.
But unable to fully comprehend this newfound horror, a pair of Viltrumites arrive to take Nolan back to Viltrum to execute him for his dereliction of his given duty.
I'll kill you for what you did to these people.
And after a hard-fought fight, Nolan is incapacitated, and Mark is left to deal with the fallout. Now over time, obviously, for the show to continue, Mark does find a way back to Earth, which is where everything else sort of picks up and where the finale sort of picks up, and where we see him fight Anissa, we see him fight Angstrom, we see Rex have his moment. But in the meantime, you know, all this other stuff is happening with Nolan, and he's going through the motions of trying to discover like what to do with his guilt, what to do with this newfound desire to live for something other than the Viltrum Empire. And it's a really powerful series of moments. Seeing Nolan have this strange, like almost vicarious way of fixing what he did to Mark and Debbie through these Thrax and aliens is a character moment that feels so well earned. There's so much depth given to Nolan's character through no dialogue, pure visuals and music, that by the time that Mark comes and interacts with him, you almost just want them to make up right there and just fight together. But Invincible isn't like that. Invincible is nuanced. Its depths are yet uncharted. And so Nolan is taken away, and Mark has to make his way back to Earth by himself, alongside his new brother, Oliver, who I mentioned before. Debbie sees it as another chance, a chance to do better, a chance to maybe do a little bit right. But it's also a reminder of everything else that happened with Nolan. While we may be through the core meat of this video's runtime, I did save the best for last, and you'll be pleased to know, so did Invincible. While Season 1 was all about stakes and context, Season 2 was all about growth and change. Season 3 is all about consequences. Cecil has to face the consequences of the Reanimen, a series of undead soldiers with enough strength to give even Mark some temporary obstacles. A choice that Cecil sees as absolutely necessary in the eventuality that Mark could turn out like his father. And Mark has to face the consequences of raising Oliver and his own mercy and kind-heartedness being taken advantage of. Eve has to face the consequences of maturity and fixing her relationships. Rex has to face the way he's lived his life and to be a better person. You get the idea. Mark starts the season off by training himself to the max, going through a gauntlet of tests to prove that he'll be ready by the time a Viltrumite invades Earth. But when he discovers the duplicitous nature of Cecil utilizing an army of Reanimen, a creature that nearly killed his own friends, his vision of Cecil's altruism is shattered. Consequences. Eve, still reeling with the guilt of her various failures and her inability to reconnect with her family, actually ends up dating Mark and nearly getting killed because of it. Consequences. Rex, one of the few to constantly have Mark's back, is duly punished for his choice to aid Mark against Cecil when the latter tries to subdue him due to his overreactions. And as a result, going up to bat for Mark, he is forced out of the Guardians and brings a chunk of the team with them, ultimately becoming one of the first lines of defense when Angstrom returns from the seemingly dead to rip a hole in reality that lets in a series of alternate versions of Invincible that decimate the planet.
I murdered my own father. You really think you're gonna take me down?
This all results in Rex sacrificing his own life to kill an evil variant of Mark to save the people that he's grown to care about so much.
But I'm the idiot who took you with me.
Yeah? How? You're out of shit to explode.
I've got one thing left.
Mm-hmm. And what's that?
My entire goddamn skeleton, dickhead.
Rex has one of the greatest character arcs in comic book storytelling, and indefinitely has one of the best character arcs in comic book media in general. To see him go from just this loud, brash, kind of frankly annoying character to being this one you just want to root for and you want to see successful, and you see his maturity and you see how he grows and you see how much he fucking cares about doing better. And he does do better.
Because you got through it. And then you got through my douchebag teenage ass dumping my problems on you and hiding in your bedroom for a year and a half. Then 100 other battles with Teen Team. Through all of that, you've saved so many people. And each time, you made this shitty, awful, terrible world A little bit better.
It just comes at the consequence of losing everything that he wanted and sacrificing his life. Consequences. Debbie, trying to piece back together a life that was nearly ended in a split second, tries her hand at raising Oliver, trying to right the wrongs of her perceived failures with Nolan and Mark, and while Oliver proves to be as headstrong as his older brother and intensely strong physically, he overdoes it and he kills people. And even after that, despite the disappointment of his family, he tries to make up for it and earn his place in the world, and then Conquest appears and he goes to bat for Mark and is very nearly killed. While a lot of people have pointed to Season 3 as more filler than usual, I stand firmly in the opposite corner. Season 3, and frankly just Invincible as a series in general, is all about showcasing the individual fallout of every single character when faced with the reality of their choices. No one is exempt from this rule. Even minor supporting characters like Duplicate, Immortal, Ray, Robot, Alan, and so many more have to face down the road that led them to this moment. They all learn, sometimes the easy way and sometimes the hard way, that the only way forward is with a helping hand and a heaping portion of humility. But humility is hard-earned, as we see with Rex in particular. Sometimes it takes a bullet to the head to see things clearly. And yes, Season 3 is dominantly filled with more introspective consequences rather than life or death ones. To a degree. Now Rex, as I mentioned before, sees his life clearly for the first time in, well, ever. He sees now that to live a life of regret is to fail as a friend. He makes increasingly smart choices to regain the trust of his peers. He makes constant improvements, and he even manages to begin a healthy relationship with Ray after she survives her encounter as well. All for it to end in a literal blaze of glory when he decides to sacrifice himself so his newfound friends can safely get away. As I said, he goes from the most annoying, funny, and aggravating character to a pile of doubt in himself, and now to a pillar of strength and admiration in his own sacrifice. You see what I'm saying? Setup, growth, consequences. But consequences come for everybody, and Mark's refusal to listen to Anissa arrives in the form of Conquest. Now, when Conquest arrives on Earth, the differences between him and Anissa could not be more apparent. Anissa is graceful, harsh, and in the most literal sense of the term, sexy. She exudes confidence in her abilities and knows that she has a reason to go easy on Mark. Conquest shares none of that. He's far from sexually appealing. He's immediately violent, overpowering Mark with more ease than Nolan did in Season 1. And the contrast to the finale of Season 1 are very evident in this finale.
Stop! Are you crazy?
But the outcome is immensely more devastating and hugely more impactful. Nolan leveled Chicago and killed tens of thousands. Conquest levels multiple cities and kills hundreds of thousands. Nolan beats Mark to a pulp but relents out of newfound guilt and mercy. Conquest literally shatters Mark's bones, splits Adam Eve nearly in two, almost stretches Oliver to a stain on the ground, and never relents. But only after taunting him, pushing him to his limits, and we finally get to see Mark in his unbridled, powerful, and violent glory.
I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how fast you are. I can see the future. You don't live to see tomorrow.
But as a brief aside, Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Conquest, anybody who was a naysayer needs to take it back. He does everything right with the character, and his monologue about how lonely he is and how he sees himself as more of a monster than anything else, but he's sort of given in to this idea of like, better to be a monster than to be a lackey.
I am a victim of my own success. Conquest. I don't even get a real name. Some days I feel so alone I could cry, but I don't. I never do. Because what would be the point? Take it to your grave.
Is really frightening and really well done. It turns Conquest from just being frightening because he physically overpowers everything, but also being mentally frightening because you almost empathize with him. Despite the fact that we just saw him shove his hand straight through Adam Eve, he actually is empathetic. But Mark, he almost revels in the violence at first. He wants to fight Conquest. It isn't until he's given a very healthy dose of reality that he knows he's messed up. When he's pushed over his limit, we see the underlying current of anger and violence in Mark. He's frightening.
Is this what you wanted? You enjoyed yourself? Still having fun? Answer me!
Pushing through bones that are literally sticking out of his body, blinded by blood half the time, and his own organs barely holding it together. And all of this is delivered so incredibly by Steven Yeun. He is such a damn good actor, and I'm so happy he's getting more recognition. He's amazing in Walking Dead, he's amazing in Minari, he's amazing in Beef, and he's amazing in Invincible.
Cecil! I need you, Cecil! Please keep breathing.
The turn from seeing this version of Mark where he's so overly violent that this even comes through his emotions, even when he's sobbing his eyes out, and even when his voice is cracking because he's sitting there cradling the body of his friend and at one point cradling the body of his girlfriend. The way that he just like screams at the sky, and the way that he just begs for Cecil to come help and just begs for anybody to come do something. It's so reminiscent of what happened with Nolan, where he recognizes that he's responsible for this, but in a way he almost wants to have somebody else come take some of the burden from him. Not in a selfish way, but in just a very real, very raw, very scary way. A thing that I think all of us would do in a situation like this. But he manages to find it in himself. That same easy access to violence that all Viltrumites possess. That same violence that his father possesses. And as he beats Conquest to a stain in the earth, the blood spatter looking eerily similar to his own at the hands of Nolan, he screams out to the universe, caring not at all whether Conquest hears him or not. To Mark, he's lost almost everything, and so he takes it out on Conquest as he's splayed out. Headbutt after headbutt, breaking bone after bone, spreading a cascade of crimson into the crevices of stone and dirt. Conquest is dead, and Mark stands, but not in triumph, in regret. Regret for not doing it sooner, regret for not killing other villains sooner. And as he sits in the hospital next to Oliver, he vocalizes this. Never again will he let a villain threaten the lives of those he loves.
So if anyone else ever puts my family or anyone I love at risk, I won't hesitate to kill them.
Now I have no doubt you're tired of hearing that Invincible is peak, bro. And while I struggle to recommend it to everyone in general, I have no issue recommending it to people who enjoy good writing, believable and investment-worthy characters, strong sense of style, adrenaline, and payoff. Not every second or minute of Invincible stands up to scrutiny, but every plot point does. Nothing here is done for the sake of looking cool, sounding interesting, or creating a social media-worthy clip. It's all done for the sake of making these characters relatable, aspirable, and in some cases reprehensible. Everything is done for the sake of its own merit and the story at large. We now understand in some ways the looming threat of the Viltrum Empire. We now know why Anissa wouldn't kill Mark and why Conquest was toying with him, because Mark might be one of the few Viltrumites able to contest the strength of the Empire. As Nolan delivers the shattering final word, there's not a whole lot of pure-blood Viltrumites left. We don't even know if he's one of them. And the fact that Mark is as strong as he is, as resilient as he is, despite only being a half-blood Viltrumite, changes everything. No side character is ignored or given too much exposition. Everyone has their due, their monologue, their hero moment. I mean, some certainly get the treatment more effectively than most, but we still have several more seasons of growth. And the writing, my god, the writing. It has no problem switching between sincerity, humor, spectacle, exposition, and pointed without missing a single beat. No dialogue is wasted. Everything feels purposeful and an intention of its main characters. Everything feels like it belongs. There's no long-winded speeches about senators, no pontificating about the abandonment of God, and no needlessly profanity-laden exposition dumps about something you've heard 4 times in one season. No matter the character's perceived or real depth, importance or strengths, they feel tailor-made for this writing. I mean, a large part of that is in thanks to Robert Kirkman, because he has this uncanny ability to manage ensemble casts of characters. And I have no doubt that if you have no intention of watching Invincible, there's precious little I can do to convince you otherwise. But I hope that you really take this video to heart. I hope you give it a shot and let yourself be immersed in the world that Kirkman and company have created. I find myself more excited to learn about the world of Invincible than I do about upcoming DC or Marvel projects. There's a palpable sense of tension, mystery, wonder, and horror in Invincible than any other comic book adaptation, and they fail to capitalize on it in the same way. Homelander stopped being scary. Thanos is dead. Superman isn't here yet. Long live Invincible. Long may it reign.